Welcome to the Global Food Defense Institute's 2017 Global Food Defense Recertification. I'm Rod Wheeler, and over the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to review those things that are very important for you to maintain your food defense program at your facility and just kind of brush up on some of the things that you should already be aware of. We're going to talk a little bit about FSMA, and then I'm going to give you all a couple of examples of things that you should be aware of. We're going to look at a couple of other current cases of product tampering, food tampering, and we're going to talk a little bit about your response to those types of incidents. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. As you know, everything that we're going to talk about and we have been talking about is the result of 9/11. We will never forget the horrific events that took place in the United States back on 9/11 and some of the attempted events that has taken place up to this point. So here's a flashback slide. Back in 2004, Tommy Thompson made the statement, "For the life of me, I cannot understand why terrorists have not attacked our food supply, because it is so easy to do." Well, let's fast forward now, maybe 15 years, and that statement is no longer true. There's a number of companies, not only in the United States, but around the world, that has increased their levels of security significantly at their food processing facilities, and so it's not easy for terrorists to attack our food supply. The one thing we do know, though, however, is that a terrorist organization will pick and choose their targets. So the question for all of us on the webinar right now is simply this: do we have a hard target, or is your facility a soft target? Only you would know the answer to that. So I recently had the opportunity to visit with a supply chain of retail stores, grocery stores on the West Coast. And they also have a number of food production facilities. When you walk into their lobby, there's a banner that says over 2 million consumers will eat our good tasting food products today from one of our 50 stores. And that's a good thing. However, I think the challenge for all of us becomes, what does this banner mean to the Sarnea brothers? And as you can see, that's the Sarnea brothers there. They're the Boston Bombers. Does this banner have a different meaning for them or somebody with the Sarnea brothers mindset? Absolutely, you bet it does. So just as a quick refresher, we had the Bioterrorism Act in 2002. In 2004, the government updated the recommendations and the guidelines for the Bioterrorism Act. And now in 2011, we have the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is also known as FSMA. And that's going to be the guiding document for a number of years to come. It currently is the guiding document. Companies have to comply with various elements of FSMA in order to continue to have their products sold in commerce. Now, the thing to remember here is that FSMA not only applies to domestic companies here in the United States, but it also applies to foreign companies and foreign corporations that may be exporting product to the United States. They too have to comply with the elements of the Food Safety Modernization Act. So let's talk about some of the current things that we have to be concerned about when it comes to and as it pertains to food defense and facility protection. The threat of ISIS on the homeland is always going to be number one in that list. It's a priority. We know for a fact that organizations such as ISIS, ISIL, AQAP have already talked about and have targeted various forms of terrorism here in the United States and, of course, abroad. Our responsibility is to make sure that with the food and agricultural industry, we do everything we possibly can, not only to identify and recognize any acts of potential terrorism, but also how and when do we respond and report these acts of terrorism. And again, this terrorism could be in the form of an individual here who has bought into the ideology of one of these foreign terrorist groups, or it could be an organized group such as Al Qaeda or ISIS, and again, making headway into the United States. So take a close look. What I want you to do is just wherever you may be watching this webinar, just think about the people that are around you, whether it's in your facility, if it's in your neighborhood. Who are the people sitting next to you? Who are the folks that you come in contact with each and every day? And ask yourself, how well do I really know that person? What group affiliations does that person have? Have they made any telephone calls to Yemen or Pakistan? Remember, our responsibility, your responsibility, is to observe, assess, and report anything that you see. Observe, assess, and respond. So here's a slide that you should be familiar with. I've been using this slide for many years, and I continue to ask the same question. What does a terrorist look like? And can you spot the terrorist in these pictures? Aren't all terrorists one ethnicity? Aren't all terrorists one race? Aren't all terrorists one religion? This is what a terrorist looks like, and everyone in between. We're not going to go through each one of these images of these individuals, but just take a couple of minutes and pause the video here and just see how many of these individuals you recognize and which cases they are affiliated with. So when you look at the faces of the individuals in the previous slide and you start asking yourself, who are the terrorists? Well, we have international extremists such as Osama bin Laden in the previous slide. We have sympathizers and lone wolves, liberation movement and domestic terrorists, radical supremacists, religious extremists, environmental extremists, narco-terrorists, and the list goes on and on and on. So what type of threats are emerging that we need to be concerned about going forward? New internationals, lone wolves, obviously that one-off individual, sort of like the individual that rammed his car in front of the parliament over in the UK just recently. Psychopaths, cop killers, new weapons, new ways that people are coming up as far as trying to harm us here in the United States. And then social media. We have to be concerned with social media and some of the threats that are posed by that venue as well. So right along with these new emerging threats, we also have to have a clear understanding as to what the fatal 5 weapons of choice may be that terrorists would probably want to employ. Handheld weapons, package bombs, vehicle bombs, chemical, biological weapons, radiological, and nuclear weapons. So we have to be concerned with all of these types of things that obviously can be used with nefarious purpose to harm us.
A soft target is a place where people are gathered, such as an airport, a train terminal, or even a stadium, where before they can get through screening, they're essentially unprotected. They are prime targets for terrorists. Well, what we've seen from Al Qaeda and from ISIS is that they train to attack soft targets. They know that these are places where people are going to be gathering and where they're going to be unprotected. We saw that in the Paris attacks where a couple of the suicide bombings happened. outside of the Stade de France. In Brussels, we saw the airport and the metro station. One of the first things that authorities worry about after an event like Brussels is the possibility of copycat attacks. People who might just be thinking of doing something and then get inspired. So that's one of the reasons why you see an increased presence of police in places like Times Square, in places like Penn Station. You can only keep that increased presence for a few days. It's intended to make sure that you show an increased vigilance, but then the harder work begins behind the scenes. Wherever you put the security cordon, there's still going to be a line, and a line is always vulnerable. So the U.S. has a very robust system whereby they do sting operations to try to find these people who are online, who are talking about carrying out attacks. It's a very controversial tactic, but so far it has prevented a lot of attacks in the United States. In other countries, they're starting to copy that formula to try to do the same thing.
We see the recent attack that occurred at the Fort Lauderdale airport, where the individual just randomly began selecting targets, causing the death of a couple of people there. And of course, we remember the San Bernardino terrorist attack. But here's the question, folks. Why are people reluctant to report suspicious behavior around them? Why is it that people don't want to come forward and inform law enforcement or even plant management of suspicious behavior that they think are suspicious of individuals that may be operating within their environment? So you always want to remember this. These are the basic tenets of terrorism. Terrorists strike when and where least expected. Terrorists will sit back, they will watch how you operate, they will plan, and then they will strike. Terrorists strike soft targets. Remember, I asked the question a few slides ago. I said, is your facility a soft target or a hard target? Only you would know. I can guarantee you that if your facility is a soft target, then it is definitely on the radar of some terrorist organization or a lone wolf who have bought into the ideology of a group such as a terrorist organization like ISIL or ISIS. Terrorists don't have to be successful in the common sense of the term to accomplish their goals, and terrorist events are planned events.
Rod, just how important has observing and reporting by civilians been in preventing terrorist plots? I mean, does this stuff really work?
You know, that's an excellent question, Kathleen. Dozens of terrorist plots against the United States have been foiled since 9/11. And while many of those successes are the result of good law enforcement and intelligence, nearly half have had civilian involvement. Somebody who saw something that didn't look right and reported it. A prime example is the 2010 attempt to detonate a vehicle bomb in New York's Times Square by now convicted terrorist Faisal Shahzad. It was early evening and Times Square was crowded as usual with theater goers and tourists. Two different local street vendors noticed smoke coming from a vehicle and immediately hailed police. The would-be terrorist was later apprehended as he attempted to flee the country. He is now serving life in prison. Another example is the case of Ayman Ferris, who in 2003 scouted the Brooklyn Bridge as a potential target for radical extremists. Ferris also attempted to redeem expired airline tickets for several unknown colleagues. He claimed to be a missionary for an Islamic group, and when the travel agents became suspicious, they reported his behavior. Ferris was soon arrested and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And although First Observer Plus is strictly a domestic U.S. program, the value of domain awareness and reporting what doesn't look right was recently displayed internationally during the terrorist attacks in Brussels, Belgium. A cab driver transported 3 men to the Brussels airport with baggage that he felt was suspicious. The men tried to travel with more bags than travelers usually carry, bags that were very heavy and bags that they did not want the driver to handle. After later learning that several bombs had been detonated at the airport, the driver alerted police to his suspicions and led them to the apartment where the men had first been picked up. The suspect's apartment turned out to be an ISIS bomb-making factory, and the information provided by the driver led to other arrests and the thwarting of additional terrorist attacks. A great example of observing, assessing, and reporting.
So what are some of the vulnerabilities, in your opinion, that could occur on the farm? We see this image here of cows in the pasture. What about the animal feed? What about the areas in which the animals are being housed? How could a contaminant that goes through a animal's body ultimately end up in our finished product and then served to human beings? How can that ultimately harm Americans? Just think of the various ways. Think of it like this. If you were the bad guy, if you were the one to be Osama bin Laden or Sarnia brother, what could you do on the farm to food product that would ultimately harm consumers? Continuing on to look at the food supply chain, when you go from the farm, then you go to the food processor. Now, when we talk about food processing facilities, we're talking about supplies, we're talking employees, bulk mixing, bulk storage, water supply. Just take a quick look at the images that's on your screen now. If you, again, were the bad guy and you wanted to cause harm to consumers, what are 2 or 3 things that you could do just in those areas that you're looking at now? Stop the video and jot those things down. So continuing on with the supply chain, think about the retail environment. Retail food sales, supplies, employees, buffet services, farmers markets in the local communities, fresh produce, fresh meats. Just take another quick look at the images here on the screen. If you were the individual who wanted to cause harm to consumers, what could you possibly do? Whether it's on the retail side, the food processing side, the manufacturing side, distribution and transportation side, all of these areas could be potentially vulnerable. So the question for all of us on the webinar today is, in the position that you serve at the company in which you work, what could you do today to make a difference to make sure that our food supply remains safe and secure?
Welcome to Top 10 Archive. Think you're safe purchasing prepackaged groceries and produce? Think again, fair archivers. Strap yourself in as we present what could be our scariest installment yet, the worst food tampering cases in history. Dramatics aside, this list may prompt you to check your food twice before giving it a hearty bite. Number 10, Prince Edward Island's potatoes. It's a sad day when you can't trust a potato. And in 2014, there were many sad days. It started in October. A series of cases arose pertaining to needles and nails having been found in a supply of potatoes imported from Prince Edward Island. The first discovery stemmed from Atlantic Canada, leading eyes to focus on a French fry production facility. Despite the efforts from law enforcement and the Prince Edward Island Potato Board, the culprits responsible for over 7 counts of tampering remained at large. To tighten the noose, the Potato Board offered a $500,000 reward to anyone with information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perps. As of a year later, there were still no arrests made. Number 9, the Aqua Bomber. Just when you thought it was safe to drink water. Late 2003 was the year several households across Italy were the scene of the crime. For unknown reasons, several brands of water were on the receiving end of unhealthy additives, including acetone, bleach, and ammonia. As quickly as the tampering started, though, it ended, with only some 20 cases of tampered bottles having been reported. The perpetrators utilized needles to inject the poisonous substances directly below the bottles' caps, and while the smell was strong enough for some to know that the bottles were unsafe, 12 victims were hospitalized with stomach pains associated with the Aqua Bomber's reign of H2 terror. Number 8, Gerber's Glass Baby Food. Sometimes the worst of food tampering can come at the behest of a mix of fame-seeking consumers and small-time villains. Such is the case in the 1986 Gerber baby food scare, when 137 complaints of glass fell on the Food and Drug Administration's table. After complaints of glass in Gerber's bottles were reported in Schenectady, New York around Valentine's Day, a panic seemed to fall over additional consumers. After combing through all 137 complaints, the FDA determined those that weren't false reports seeking money were copycats that tampered with the product. Gerber stood fast that their manufacturing and packing plants were up to par, but didn't speak publicly as to potential tampering. Number 7. The Berges oranges. Japa oranges are a delicious, sweet orange grown in the Middle East, and sometimes paired with mercury. At least that was the case for the 5 children of the Berge family, a Dutch family that fell victim to a grotesque attack that was meant to hurt Israeli exports. The tactic, implemented by Palestinian terrorists, included injecting non-lethal amounts of mercury into the citrus fruit prior to export. According to threatening letters associated with the act, the move was in response to poor labor relations for oppressed Palestinian workers, though a conflicting confession by the Arab Revolutionary Army Palestinian Command was received at the Amsterdam Health Ministry. Of the 220 oranges tested in the Netherlands, 14 showed trace amounts of mercury. Number 6. Sizzler's Rat Poison Surprise. You don't even think about it, but every time you dine out, you may be putting your life at risk. This was doubly true for Sizzler patrons in 2 different locations where, a month apart from one another, each location was alerted to green pellets in soup and sauce from the salad bar. After being tested, the pellets were proven to be rat poisoning, dispersed by 57-year-old Jacqueline Elizabeth Fords of Brisbane. Sizzler shut down all self-serving salad bars in the area after the second complaint, a costly measure as the bar accounts for 60% of the restaurant's revenue. Forbes, ironically, was also the same woman that came forward with a complaint of the pellets in her soup. Number 5. The Monster with 21 Faces. It may sound like a mythological beast and may have been the name of an Edogawa Rampo villain, but the Monster with 21 Faces is actually a conspirator in poisoned candy supplies in Japan. What started in March of 1984 with the kidnapping of the CEO of Glico, a local candy manufacturer, erupted into a series of threats made by an individual that called themselves the Monster with 21 Faces, who poisoned candy by lacing it with cyanide. The monster's terror claimed its first victim in August of 1985, long after the threats ended, when the police superintendent in charge of the investigation set himself on fire over the shame of the monster still running free. Number 4. Rajneesh's Salad Bar. In 1984, the city of The Dalles in Oregon was on the receiving end of the largest bioterrorist attack in the United States, during which 751 individuals fell victim to salmonella poisoning in a political effort by followers of the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. The attacks were an attempt to tip the voting scale so that 2 of the 3 seats on the Wasco County Circuit Court and the Sheriff's Department would be held by members of the newly formed town of Rajneesh, formerly Antelope, Oregon. Despite the success in spreading salmonella, the ultimate goal was unsuccessful, as Wasco County voters assumed the group was responsible for the attacks. By November, the Rajneesh candidates withdrew. Number 3. Nicotine Beef. Sometimes all it takes is one deranged individual to put the lives of many at risk. In January of 2003, 4 Michigan families fell ill to an odd case of nicotine poisoning. What made it so odd is that the poisoning came from beef that they had purchased at a local grocer. What started with 18 people blew up into a case involving over 90, and as the complaints were fairly localized, all eyes fell upon the supermarket. On February 12th, an indictment for the arrest of an employee at the supermarket was returned, the alleged food terrorist being accused of contaminating over 200 pounds or 100 kilograms of beef with an insecticide containing high nicotine content. Number 2. Paraquat Murders. It may not have been common practice in 1985 Japan, but by now we should know not to drink random beverages found just outside of vending machines. Just don't do it, because you never know when one of them is going to be dosed with paraquat, an herbicidal quite lethal in the right dose. The first case was on April 30th, 1985 in Fukuyama, Hiroshima, with 11 more occurring between September and November. Allegedly, many of the victims took a bottled drink left outside of the vending machine, prompting owners of the machines to leave notes warning against doing so. Thanks to the voices of reason, the poisoning stopped, but the killer still roams free. Number 1. Tylenol and cyanide. Back before tamper-proof labels, it was quite easy to add a little something extra to products like Tylenol. And in 1982, an unknown individual laced capsules with potassium cyanide. New York resident James William Lewis took credit for the tampering, demanding $1 million to stop the poisonings, which had already claimed the lives of 7 people. Lewis was convicted of extortion, but wasn't originally pegged with the poisonings. In 2012, the FBI raided Lewis's home in connection with the murders, though the investigation is still pending. In the aftermath of these deaths, tamper-resistant packaging hit the market and product tampering became a federal crime.
So hopefully by now you know the difference between food safety and food defense. Real quickly, food defense focuses on protecting the food supply from intentional contamination. Food safety focuses on unintentional contamination. Now, food safety and food defense could equal both up to food protection. They actually complement one another. So that's the difference between the two. So here are the steps in developing your food defense plan and your food defense program. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but this is what I call the food defense flowchart. You start out with your vulnerability assessment. You look at your mitigation strategies. Remember, the FDA has talked about broad and specific mitigation strategies, broad and focused mitigation strategies. You look at your food defense monitoring, the plans, the procedures that you currently have in place. Your corrective actions. What about verification? Of some of the programs that you do have in place, and then reanalysis. So these are the various steps that's important and critical in making sure that you maintain an adequate food defense program at your facility. So what are some of the things that would make an agent very attractive to the wannabe bad guy and could lead to intentional contamination? 5 things, and this is new with this recertification course. Incubation period, the delayed effect. You know, terrorists are looking for something that they can put over into the product. There's going to be a delayed effect, meaning it's not going to happen right away. It may take 2 days, it may take 3 days, it may take 3 hours. Something that's going to be highly effective. Some type of contaminant that's been used in the past. Something that's easily produced and there's an adequate quantity. And then finally, something that has a low traceability, unlikely to be caught, unlikely to be recognized quickly. So obviously there's different types of agents that can affect or that can be used to harm our food supply. I only want to talk about 2 types right now though, and that's chemical agents, which could be delivered as an intentional contamination by directly adding the chemical agent to the production process. They could add the ingredients at the supplier level, indirectly add the contaminant during the production process, or cleaning supplies or pesticides. Also, don't forget about your packaging materials. There's some contaminants, chemical agents, that can be used in packaging, and then once that packaging material is absorbed by or comes in contact with the food product, then the food product may absorb whatever that chemical agent is. So you want to be aware of those things as well. So the other type of agent that I want to quickly talk about is microbiological agents. Same thing, it could be delivered as an intentional contaminant, and it could be added directly to finished product, or indirectly added to the finished product through the environment, such as listeria or something of that nature. So I want to add this new section with the recertification course here on intentional insider threats. And I just want to show you 3 short video clips of situations that has occurred over the past year or 2 where employees possibly had tried to contaminate the food product in the production facilities.
These former pizza workers are charged with a crime, but one is already out of jail. Tonight, the mother of one suspect told us she's embarrassed for her daughter's actions in the online video.
I told her, I said, you're 31, you're not 16.
One suspect's mother called her daughter's actions a stupid mistake and said hopefully she learned a lesson.
But tonight, this home video that's made by the suspects at the Domino's Pizza in Conover is getting national attention. And we've learned that the suspects could end up behind bars for several months. Eyewitness News reporter Ben Thompson was there when one of the suspects got out of jail.
Tonight, 32-year-old Michael Setzer didn't have much to say after he posted bond and walked out of court in Newton.
Get away from the truck.
Far different than the way he appeared on this YouTube video that disgusted people around the world. Sticking food up his nose while 31-year-old Christy Hammonds recorded the whole thing. The two were on the job at Domino's in Conover. Both turned themselves in tonight. They're charged with tampering with food. Hammonds' mother says she won't post the $7,500 bond until tomorrow morning. Until then, she'll remain in jail. Her mom brought her a book to pass the time. She asked that we don't show her face.
I feel very bad, of course, for the company because I know there's going to be a lot of people now that's not going to want to eat there.
We learned Hammonds is a divorced mother of two who has a criminal history, but her mom says she's ready to start again.
Very remorseful, stupid, embarrassed. Those were her words.
But first, Hammonds and Setzer might face 4 to 10 months behind bars. In Newton, Ben Thompson, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Other types of threats that we're concerned about, obviously increased level of unlawful drugs being shipped with food products from one end of the country to the other. We recently had a case where heroin was packed within several boxes of product that was due to be shipped. After questioning several employees, it was learned that there was a major drug operation in place at the plant. And I actually had the opportunity to recently get involved in an investigation whereby drugs had actually made it from the West Coast to the East Coast, and they were identified by someone at the food plant. And what we recovered and what we confiscated was several kilos of cocaine. Continuing on with various types of threats, what about gang activity? We're seeing quite a bit of increased gang activity at food plants and other infrastructures as well. We had a case in Chicago where the plant manager was fearful of even going into the facility's restroom because of the amount of gang activity going on in the plant. We also had a number of cases where employees are bringing weapons into the plant, which leads me to this question. What is your policy at your facility regarding carrying concealed weapons? Additional threats, additional things we have to be concerned about when it comes to the security of our product and our facilities. Theft of products. Food products are being sold at a much higher value on the streets these days than an iPhone and an iPad. For ready-to-eat food products, you can actually get 75 cents on the dollar. For iPads and iPhones, you can only get 33 cents on the dollar. Let me ask you this question. Why do you think that is the case, whereby electronics has a less value on the street than ready-to-eat food products? Stop the video and see if you can answer that. And what we see here with this slide is what we call clusters of cargo theft activity across the country. And where you see the darkened circles, those are considered clusters. Theft activity of food products and trailer loads occur pretty often. Matter of fact, last year there was over 863 trailer loads of product stolen. Not all food product, but just product in general. We see some of these major clusters, however, in major metropolitan areas, such as around Chicago, in the Northeast, around New York, Delaware, and those areas. We see it in the South, Florida, Georgia. And then, of course, we see it in California, in the southwest portion of the United States. So who are the insiders that could cause an adversarial event? Obviously, it could be a terrorist or somebody that is bought into the ideology of terrorism. It could be a hostile employee or visitor. It could be a psychotic employee or visitor, a subversive or a rogue employee, and of course, it could be vandals as well. So we have to be concerned with all of these types of individuals that could lead or cause an adversarial situation in our facilities. Cybersecurity is obviously a growing area of concern for law enforcement and for plant managers all across the country. We had one case recently in Michigan where at a food manufacturer, someone was able to steal the recipes and formulas for the product and they uploaded it to Craigslist for sale. This happened maybe about 1 year ago. We got the FBI involved, but we were never able to identify the person responsible for initially stealing the recipes and the formula. However, we do know for a fact that that person had to come from the inside. So the last few slides here that I want to share with you all are things that you can do right now. And again, to most of you all, this will be a reminder. But there's things that you need to continuously be aware of. And as a matter of fact, you should definitely continue to conduct vulnerability and risk assessments at your facility. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what I'm sharing with you now are the 5-step risk assessment processes that CTPAT, Customs Trades Partnership Against Terrorism, talks about. And I think the CTPAT 5-step risk assessment process is a very good basis for monitoring and corrective action when it comes to some of the deficiencies that you may find in your facility in terms of vulnerabilities and risk. Number 1, mapping cargo, data flow, and control and identifying business partners. It's very important that with your cargo and with your product supply, you know how your cargo moves throughout the supply chain, and make sure that you're even more aware of the modes of transportation, such as air, sea, rail, or truck. And what are some of the vulnerabilities that could occur at some of those modes? You want to conduct a threat assessment. Focus on terrorism, contraband smuggling, human smuggling, agriculture and public safety threats. All of these things rank when it comes to identifying threats and being prepared to guard against them. Conduct a vulnerability assessment in accordance with the CTPAT minimum security criteria. Now, vulnerability assessment includes identifying what products or services that your business has that a terrorist or criminal may desire. And don't forget, for brokers, this might include data. It could include importers, manufacturers. So all of these things are very important that when you conduct your vulnerability assessment, you take a close look at these things and discuss ways that you can reduce or mitigate whatever risk that may exist with that particular product. Once you've conducted the vulnerability assessment, you want to prepare a written action plan to address the vulnerabilities. This includes mechanisms to record identified weaknesses, who is responsible for the corrective actions of these weaknesses. Reporting results to appropriate company officials and employees is also very essential. And the fifth step in the 5-step risk assessment process is documenting the procedure for how your risk assessments are conducted. This includes reviewing and revising the procedure as needed going forward. So, what are some of the more commonly found security vulnerabilities in our supply chain? Failure to conduct a site-specific threat or vulnerability assessment. Oftentimes, there's no site security plan in place. Lack of non-existent situational response protocols in place. Failure to audit, validate, and require suppliers and vendors to have a food defense program. Identify and characterize critical nodes within the operations. I just talked about identifying the various critical nodes for transportation of product. Develop mitigation strategies to help reduce the possibility of an attack or a tampering event. Lack of security awareness and protocol training for frontline workers. Folks, you've heard me say many times, your frontline workers are your greatest asset. They need to be properly trained as to what to look for and what to do when they do spot something. No emergency action training for employees for situations such as an active shooter or an active threat. No local procedure in place for quick and immediate investigation of suspected tampering events. Failure to properly use RFID or GPS tracking devices on shipments. Lack of adequate CCTV surveillance in critical areas such as loading docks. Again, these are some of the more commonly found security vulnerabilities that we find collectively throughout the country. So we're going to conclude with 9 questions to ask yourself regarding the security of your facility. 1. Is your outside perimeter secure? Do you have adequate security signs outside indicating no trespassing? The usage of security measures may be in place, such as cameras, area under video surveillance. Number 2, is access within your operation limited? Do you restrict access to truck drivers or other individuals, especially to those areas which may be considered critical at your facility? Are your processes secure? What about shipping and receiving areas? Are they secure? Do you have an inventory system for stored materials? So in other words, how can you determine if you are missing materials from your facility? This could include cleaning materials and laboratory equipment. What about access to your water supply, the water that you use for processing? Is that access limited? Is mail opened away from sensitive areas? Do you have screening and training procedures in place for your workforce? What about overall access to sensitive areas, mixing, blending areas? These are all considered critical areas, sensitive areas, and you definitely need to restrict access to persons that have no reason to be in those areas. So just to conclude and to reiterate certain things that you really need to take away. This is very important. 5 things you can do now to significantly reduce your security risk to your assets and your people. Build a culture of food defense and security across suppliers and vendors. Ask to review your supplier's site security plans and build the plans together. Immediately conduct a site-specific vulnerability assessment. Consider using the CT-PAT standards that I talked about here. Improve alert and warning systems. Use intelligence when deciding where to place camera systems. Improve information sharing between your local first responders, police, fire, EMS, and members of your management. Don't just say something, do something. Your frontline workers are your greatest asset. Make sure they have the training and the knowledge to know what to do and how to respond. So last but not least, you want to conduct penetration testing of the security posture of your facility. Are the security measures that you have in place being followed, such as no tailgating, no piggybacking in the facility, No bringing product from outside the facility into the areas. No taking of photographic images in critical areas in the plant. These are areas that you can conduct penetration testing, and just to give you some degree of assurance that your security program is definitely beneficial. And finally, as I've been saying all along, don't just say something, do something. You know, food defense has been around now for quite a long time, and hopefully most of the information that I share with you in this recertification PowerPoint presentation was just a refresher. For example, if you didn't know the difference between food safety and food defense in 2017, then I highly recommend that maybe you should go back and take a complete food defense course. That information has been around since 2002. So again, I congratulate each and every one of you all for maintaining your certification. Things are changing in the industry, and we have a lot of new information coming out. We have new courses that we're developing. Many of the courses are going to be online. So I would highly encourage you to make sure you keep in touch. Visit the website, which is www.myfooddefense.com. And if you have any questions whatsoever, be sure to reach out to us at the Global Food Defense Institute and let us assist you. Finally, for your recertification, there's a form that you should complete. I think the form is connected to this presentation in the beginning. It's just an enrollment form. Once you complete that form with just your basic information, name, and how you want your name to appear in your certificate, email that to us at mail@myfooddefense.com. Mail@myfooddefense.com. And then what we will do is return your certification or your certificate to the address that you list in your email. Thank you very much, folks. Take care of yourself, be safe, and keep each other safe.